Om Shanti. Good evening. Warm welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. And as always, we like to start with a bit of a experience. So, sitting as a Raj Yogi, aware of myself as the Raj, the sovereign, that mastery of the self, that I am the ruler of these physical senses. I do not have to distance myself from the eyes or the ears. But I stabilize myself. This awareness of me, the actor inside. I, the soul, this benevolent being. Just a point of peace. And then that changes how I use these eyes and ears. Seeing truthfully, seeing lovefully, seeing clearly, insightfully, and listening with respect, with patience, with wisdom. As a sovereign, I live from the inside out. The pure qualities of the self determining what I express. I no longer react from the outside in. This is how I sit here now as a Raj Yogi. Om Shanti.
So, good evening, Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. And tonight's session is the power of recognition. And this is a very interesting topic. And perhaps we will start with Judy. What is recognition? What does it have anything to do with Raja Yoga? Or even maybe a step back in general?
One thing that really struck me when I first heard the foundation ideas of Raj Yoga, the study, is how one simple sentence could reframe my entire world. To be told I'm a soul changed everything, every aspect of my so-called life. It's not that I moved away from anything, but it's a reframing. And so this word recognition or recognition, cognitive psychology, if you will, looks at how we perceive and understand. And I remember there was just one thing, taking cognitive psychology, there was one thing that stood out for me in that class. I enjoyed it thoroughly, actually, and realized it was probably preparatory to coming to Raj Yoga. But one thing that stood out is how one's perception, which is very internally driven, it depends on the scheme or framework I'm working with, but one's perception can really alter completely how I experience something. So I think we have a classic example in front of you. I don't think you can see all of this, but what Nora is using as a mic is pieces of things that actually we don't traditionally think of as a mic. So this part of her apparatus is
Don't
actually
give it away.
a light. It's a light. It's classic cognitive psychology, but she went beyond seeing it just as a light, and she saw it as something that could be part of a mic stand, which it's doing very successfully. Why not? And so we get very fixed in how we see things, which means we're blind to seeing things other way. Cognition is how I see things. So there's a lot of power, for better or for worse, in how I see things. So what Raj Yoga does is challenge me to see things in a different way that was always there, but I had become blind to it because I'm so fixed on seeing things in a particular way, in specifically a physical way. So Raj Yoga opens what we call our third eye, but the capacity to see the invisible. And we say recognition because I'm being simply reminded. I used to see things that way, and now I'm just being reminded so I can see things that way again. So, and it's extremely powerful because it has this reframing capacity when I see things in a different way. I don't know, optical illusions is a great example. I'm sure you've all seen the picture. Is it the young woman or the old hag? And, all you see is one or the other. And someone's saying, no, can't you see the other one? It's like, I can't. And then suddenly it's as if your eyes open. It's like, oh my goodness, I can see the other figure. And now I can't unsee it. And everything's changed. So being able to see things I was previously blind to or reminded has an incredible reframing impact on, how we understand.
I feel this is actually a great start because I was thinking about then from your experience, because there are many who've taken the course, there are many who probably listened to a few of these interview with Raja Yogi sessions. From your experience, the practice of considering myself to be a soul, how has that shifted how you see things?
It's such a fascinating thing. Consider yourself to be a soul. So the example that we sometimes like to use is this idea of, feeling the heartbeat and, oh my goodness, I feel a heartbeat. Oh, and the idea that when I wasn't doing this, was the heart not beating? No, of course it was. But then I became aware. I touched it. So I became aware of its activity. So when we say you're a soul, it's not like I suddenly become one. I've always been a soul. I just forgot. It's a funny thing to forget. I'm forgetting myself, but I forgot. And I replaced that with a whole different world of self, a whole different identity. And based on that different identity, I constructed a whole way of experiencing and acting. And it's just phenomenal. My whole life is based on that identity. So when we shift it, I see myself in a different way. We say who I really am. I see myself truly. I'm a soul. It is a complete shift of every aspect of my life. What I thought was mine is not mine. What I thought I did, it's got nothing really to do with me. So it's a complete everything, particularly the value of the self, completely shifted. So again, this incredible reframing, it's such a simple little thing. We call it a switch in awareness. And yet, the example I was thinking of the other day was the blind men, a group of blind men or people in a room with an elephant. So they're completely blind, and each one is in a different part of the elephant. Some's feeling the trunk, but they're blind. Some a leg, some the skin. And based on in their blindness, what they're feeling like, oh, it's a tree. No, it's a carpet. Right? So, but it's as if they're in the dark. And then, they become unblind. The light switch is turned on. They all agree, it's an elephant.
Completely enough.
Right? And that completely changes how they're experiencing that thing. So we're kind of in the dark about the most important thing in our life, which is ourself. And we've structured, it's amazing how we can build a whole story and framework on a complete misunderstanding. We do it all the time. But this is the deepest misunderstanding about myself. And I've structured a whole way of operating on a completely wrong understanding of myself. So it's going to just crumble. But it's not that I rebuild a truthful a truthful way of operating on the truth about myself. So again, the switch comes on, the light comes on. We say enlightened, I see myself as I truly am.
So, in terms of that, reframing that shift, do you feel recognition is the same as thinking my way into, a shift in my frame of perception?
Cognition is quite a deep activity. It's literally how I understand. So we're really looking at our standard of that word, understanding or perceive. And of course, in school, it's a odd thing that I remember quite clearly, and you might as well, that how they tested our understanding of something often was just, could I memorize it and repeat it back? I didn't actually have to grasp the concept. I just had to memorize and repeat. I remember many exams this way. And I remember one incident. I was grade 12, high school, and I was at it was an amazing high school. And the entire course was structured on memorization. Completely. So you showed up every day with foolscap paper. This is before computers. And in longhand, the instructor talked to the top of our head because we were constantly looking down and writing down every word he said. And at the end, you had a stack. At the end of the year, you had a textbook. You had a biology textbook. And all you did, I had been told this before by someone who had taken the course, all you had to do well in this course is just write down everything he says, memorize it, short-term memory. On the exam, just regurgitate it back. Got brilliant marks.
I
It's not
wonder
that I
if it's the
actually,
same bio professor I had.
I didn't understand anything. Like if you ask me about the Krebs cycle now, I have no idea. But what was frightening is there came a point, this professor had a very nice relationship with a local university that actually was a very high standing university in the country. And every year they accepted two students to, do some practical to be a lab assistant in the biology department. And he, because based on the marks, he said, would you, you have the marks to be able to do this. And I looked at him as if he was mad because I don't even know. Maybe I said out loud, you would say, like, I don't understand anything. Like, I would be horrified. I would feel so ill-equipped. All that I've shown is I have a good short-term memory. And that's the concept of understanding that we're using. In spiritual practice like this, that will get you nowhere. The idea that I can repeat back what I've heard in the course means nothing, actually. The fact that I can sit here and talk to you doesn't actually mean anything either. But what we want to know is, has there been a massive, and I don't want to frighten anyone, but the term we actually use, the standard we use is dying alive. That I actually, on the deepest possible level, my sense of self has shifted as if I came out of amnesia. And as a result of that, the way I see things will shift, the way I behave will shift, the qualities that awaken inside of me. There is a massive, it's like an internal earthquake. This is not just thinking a point of light. It's far, far deeper. To say I understand is far deeper. And the tests that we get in this study are, of course, tests in our day-to-day life. When a so-called big crisis or problem, do I still have that Om Shanti, that deep peace? Is it stable? So very practical tests. I feel that if someone can't even sit in open-eyed meditation and have a very powerful experience of themselves as a soul seated in, then it hasn't even begun. So repeating back isn't really, it doesn't work in this university at all. It's useful, and at least my mind's focusing on this, but I need to want to have a far deeper experience and say, I've recognized.
So, in light of recognition, what does one have to do when they're sitting, eyes open? What can that look like in terms of that endeavor to try to turn that switch on?
It's really a funny thing in this university, this spiritual university, is that cleverness will get you nowhere. Purity will get you everywhere. So, purity means that I'm able to let go of what is temporary or illusory. So, when I'm sitting in meditation, what usually happens to souls is their mind is being pulled by their work or by their family or by their roles and responsibilities. There's no purity. They're being pulled by these temporary attachments. And so we classically have thought meditation, I need to go somewhere, I need to be away from these roles and responsibilities I need to go on a holiday. And a form of a mini holiday is to sit and close my eyes. I need to block out because I don't even have control over I'm so attached to this body and how it functions. I can't even have it. The attachments are so deep. So to have the eyes open, and this is, I find, is a really interesting point I was sharing on the other day, that we're trying to go into deeper levels of silence, which means silence here is freedom from temporal thoughts. So going deeply into what is eternal. And that silence starts with attention, the first stage. Some call it mindfulness, but attention, being able, with my eyes open, to be completely present here and not have my mind pulled, to stand at attention. And so we were talking about exploring this idea that some people, when they're in a noisy place, they're not able to hold a conversation with someone because all of that noise, they have no control over their
Mhm.
sense organs. Attention means I'm able to have that control. So the attachment to the sense organs and to the physical is so deep. There isn't even that basic purity that I have to close my eyes, right? And then I'm actually just going into a holiday, if you will. I don't want to check out. I want to check in. And so, really, kind of getting all that clear, this is about purity, that I'm getting closer to experiencing the truth by moving away from what is illusion, these attachments.
Because some ask that question, what do I say to myself? What do I talk to myself? Now,
Mm.
in a way, we're kind of getting to the nitty gritties
Mm-hmm.
but perhaps it's actually really important because we
Mm-hmm.
can all be sitting there. Some of
Mm-hmm.
us are even sitting here with our eyes open, but what are we
Mm.
doing? What are we endeavoring? Especially if the aim is to have that switch, like a snap of a finger that there is recognition.
Well, luckily, we have pioneers in front of us. So, one is shown here, Brahma Baba. And he really understood how to. We use the term meditation, which he didn't really use much. He liked introversion. I like that word in English. Version, the verses or the information that's been given. What we say versions. So intra is versions within about the self, how I talk to myself. So the script inside, specifically, what am I trying, what am I saying, how am I using my mind? And he was really basic and simple, very, very basic and simple. There wasn't rainbows and puppy dogs and that we tend to do. He was just, actually, he repeated to himself a lot, I am a soul. I am a soul.
With the intent for certain
With
specific
the intent to
experience, right?
understand. So again, going back to understanding that he really wanted to, what does that feel like? What does that mean? What does that awaken in the self? So, it's funny how we actually all have a facility to repeat a script to ourselves and take it on. Unfortunately, the scripts are wrong. So a classic example is if someone's repeatedly saying to you, you're not good at that, it's funny how we'll accept it and actually believe I'm not good at that. I remember once I had an incident where I was in a drawing class, and in drawing class, it's so interesting. Everyone sees differently, everyone has a different style. And the drawing class was over the full year, but the first term you had one drawing instructor and the second term another. And at the end of each term, you had a portfolio of your drawings and you were one-on-one with that was your exam. You reviewed your portfolio one-on-one with your drawing instructor and they critiqued it. And so the first year, I had a drawing instructor who really loved shading.
I love
Nora loves
shading.
shading, but she knows I'm very deliberate. It's like a line is a line. And it's not that I don't use shading, but I tend to be very deliberate style. So I every class I went there, if he was looking over my shoulder, I knew it wasn't right the way that he wanted. And I just got from what he said to me, I literally came out of that first term feeling I can't draw. And I would just like to state at this point that everyone can draw, by the way. But I came away because of his body language, what he actually said to me, his comments. And it's not his fault. I believed the script. He just had his opinion, but I believed it. And I came out of the first term, I can't draw. So then the second term came along, and it's not that I can change my style. I just kept doing what I was doing. But I'm reviewing the portfolio with my instructor, and she's saying, okay, this is, and then she starts to pick up. I'm quite despondent. I'm just waiting for this to be over. And she finally stops herself and she goes, wait a minute. I, I'm getting a feeling that you feel you can't draw. And I said, well, I can't. I mean, and she said, that's ridiculous. Of course you can draw. Of course, so it made me very aware. These scripts, we are we have a great facility in understanding, taking in deeply, becoming scripts that run in our mind. We don't have a problem with that. It's just the scripts are wrong. And we've developed a facility with going in deeply into what we call body conscious or vice driven scripts, ego driven scripts, fear driven. We have no problem taking those on. It seems to be a challenge for us to absorb or take on truth driven scripts. It's ironic, but souls really are challenged with experiencing themselves to be a soul, or they're deceived into thinking they are. Like, yes, I can think it, point of light, but the behavior and the attitudes indicate that it hasn't really sunk in. So we can do it. We don't have a problem. We can do it. It's just we're used to doing it with the wrong scripts, and we're challenged when we have scripts based on the truth.
So does that put visualization in a sort of a tricky place then? The
Mm,
intention is to wake up to this memory of myself as a soul, and visualization. I mean, it certainly can play a role, but it feels like it could also be a double-edged sword.
mm, yeah. The proof is, of course, always in the pudding. If if I really have experienced something deeply, then as I say, it will show up in attitudes and
Mhm.
behavior. But the term visualization is a very interesting term. Um, and for me, we always say, I am a soul. I cannot be seen with a physical eyes. I can't be seen with a microscope, but I can be experienced. That to me covers what we're talking about with visualization. It's not necessarily that I visually see something, although that may happen, and it certainly helps me to focus. So it's not to be dismissed. Um, but to actually experience it, I used to say, what's it like for a blind person? I don't know. I really don't know. But maybe they do internally have a visual of a spark of light. It has incredible focusing power. But again, it may not mean that I have taken it on, that I've understood, but it does help us to focus, especially initially. It really does, because we've got a whole lot of other things going on in our head. So it just draws, just like, an archery target. I'm trying to hit the middle, and it helps to have that visual for me, but eventually it's beyond the visual. I just need to hit the middle of the target. So, but it helps to concentrate and give reference. So it's not to be dismissed, but it's also not to be confused
Mhm.
with I've actually gone to the experience.
So I have a proposition is that
Mm,
we actually continue with this topic
mm.
next week. Actually, the next two
Wow, time
sessions.
flew.
Actually,
Mm,
reason why is because uh, there is the waking up.
mm,
And then the next session, it would be lovely to talk about the sustaining that
mm,
recognition, or even how recognition can even sustain your
mm,
interest in the study.
mm,
And the third topic about, we often call it finishing power, is that
mm,
we're really great at starting things. We're not so good at sustaining things, and we're
mm,
definitely not very good at finishing things.
mm,
But we'll go into that topic in a couple of weeks.
mm,
But in terms of this piece, because you mentioned something actually in the very beginning that I feel is really, really important,
mm,
is when you were sharing about that we have certain fixed ideas. And that
mm.
when I have fixed ideas, I see things in a certain
Yeah.
way. And perhaps if you could elaborate a little bit more in terms of what that means, fixed ideas and how I see things in terms of attachment versus detachment in this context of soul consciousness.
Mm. I mean, thank goodness we actually are souls. Otherwise, this thing would never get off the ground. Um, and it's really interesting, attachment and detachment, because, you know, the essence of spirituality is said to be letting go, that there is sorrow and attachment. And so what happens is, rather than considering oneself to be a soul, one just tries to, I've heard this language, remove the self and just be nothing. Really, there's no sense of self, and that's our only concept of becoming free from all of the things that cause us sorrow. So, the example I've always really enjoyed was this idea of a toddler, having pair of scissors in their hand, and that's kind of dangerous. And you're like, let go, and they won't let go because in their mind, they see it not as scissors, but as a glittery object that's really kind of fascinating. They don't see it as damaging. And they're just hanging on to this really beautiful, glittery object. But you have a different perception. You can see what they're attached to is really dangerous. So the more you try to let them go, make them let go, the stronger they attach because they just see it as. So a couple of things have to happen here. I need to enable them to see it as it truly is. And I also need to offer a replacement. And I felt these two things were always missing. So we just kind of wrench it out of their hand. The whole thing becomes quite violent. I try to stop those vicious thoughts or stop doing this in a very repressive or violent way. But if I could understand, again, be reminded, if you will. So the idea that, to awaken that understanding that if you continue, there's such beautiful ways of seeing the consequences of thinking of ourselves as bodies. I can make a list of the problems, and you probably can too. All the issues that will come up if I think I'm the body, and of course, top of the list is I die, right? Like because it's temporary, so that's a problem. Right? So starting to understand, okay, great. I might get to the point where I say, okay, thinking I'm a body is a problem, but I'm really attached, like really attached. I get, now I'm in the smoker's dilemma where I get this is killing me, but I'm addicted. So I need a replacement. And this is soul consciousness isn't just some interesting method to replace. The
That's my other
replacement
question.
is the truth. I'm the power. In fact, the only thing that's powerful enough to serve as a replacement would have to be the truth. So, this idea that I am a soul, and when we sit quietly, we say recognition. I am remembering it. When I sit quietly, I begin to recognize actually, it's true. It's true. I can feel that I'm observing this body. That there's me, the thinker, and there's this. But like I can begin to experience that it's true and it's strong enough. But the addiction to thinking we're the body, is so deep that it will take time for the replacement to work, to actually take, as you say, sustain it and overcome the resistance. But these two things, like I need to understand the significance of saying I'm a body, and I need to understand the significance of saying I'm a soul. So that we call this the intellect convincing me. And then, I arrive, okay, yeah, I can see it's a real problem. It's actually crazy to think I'm about the body. So now what? What else? What's my other options? And I feel there's actually many people on this planet that are looking for the other option. They're really struggling with identity, really struggling. They're trying, they just move from one box to another and it doesn't quite satisfy. Who am I really? There's such pitfalls in these temporary ways of identifying ourselves. I am a soul, this eternal sense of self. One, if giving themselves the opportunity, will realize, oh my goodness, it's true. Now the journey of stabilizing, of the replacement becoming quite powerful.
I feel that this is very essential that we're even talking about this because it's helping souls illuminate what is my quality, what is my standard, and perhaps maybe even individuals don't even know. Perhaps it's there and it's stirring inside and it's their timing.
Mm.
But especially when you were sharing about that professor when he said you should maybe apply to be a lab assistant.
Mm.
but there seems to be this certain standard inside you that perhaps again for souls it's just not clear of what their standard is as well.
Right. Yeah. I think definitely I feel very uncomfortable. Um, I'll probably just, will say it if I do feel uncomfortable not really getting the concept or getting inside of something. I don't feel, and I don't know if you might be the same, in school, we were really just memorize it. You didn't really necessarily have to understand what's going on, just regurgitate. That would always make me uncomfortable. I always felt like a fraud. Actually, I don't really understand. I'm just a good student, so the idea of smart versus sensible became very obvious to me, and I would always prefer to be sensible than clever. So, um, theoretical versus practical, which one's going to help you when you're in a fix, right? So, we have that famous story of the pundit, right? The Matajis would come to the pundit, and every day he said, if you're in a crisis, just keep chanting, remembering God, and it will carry you through. And he told them this. And then they had to cross a river to get to the pundit. And one day they're walking back with the pundit, and the bridge is out. And now they have to cross the river. And it seems a little dangerous without the bridge. And they said, well, Pundit Ji said, just, remember God. And they had genuinely created a relationship with God, that it did give them that strength and support. So they were able to cross. But the pundit was left on the other side. They said, come, pundit, just do what you told us to do. And he said, are you crazy? I'm going to die if I cross this river. And they're like, but you told us that if we remembered God, that it would give us, and it works. And he says, it doesn't feel like it's going to work at all to me. So he was repeating it, but he himself was not living it, embodying it. And that can be a problem when you are faced by a crisis. So it makes me very nervous when I don't really understand something. I don't feel it's very useful. So,
Well, speaking of useful, hopefully this has been useful at least to help one look inside at their efforts as well, because honestly, you will find such benefits, just massive change in just your sense of reality. Just to realize how profound it is to go into that experience and that realization. But I regret we are running out of time. But our topic next week will still be about the power of recognition. And it seems to go both ways in terms of the impact of the power of recognition to help me sustain the intention of the study, but also the other way around as well. How do I sustain that recognition? So I think that in general, for many souls, they'll probably be feeling that. I've seen many students come through the course, but I feel from many what they share is that something else sort of took up my time. So be quite interesting. So perhaps we will transition now to a little reflection.
I just wanted to end by sharing that I recently was reading some notes. I think it was 4 or 5 very simple, short statements from one of the very senior brothers in this organization. And I'm paraphrasing a bit, but the feeling I got from one of the points was really, really go into the experience of being a soul. Everything else is a waste of your time. It's quite powerful. So, having said that, let's see if we can start to dive into that. It's very helpful to keep my approach to soul consciousness, recognizing I am a soul, very, very simple and basic. Creating that feeling, coming into that reality that I am observing right now. I'm looking out through the physical eyes. I'm looking in at my thoughts. In this role of observer, it does feel like the body fades away out of my awareness. In fact, I can observe this body too. And at that moment, I do feel separate. That there is the body and there is me, the one observing. I am aware that this body is perishable, temporary. And I, the being life, I am imperishable. My journey with this body will eventually end. The form of the body will change, but I will continue in the form of an invisible point of light, spiritual energy living. I can feel I have a very intimate connection to this body, that I'm easily pulled into feeling the physicality of this body as if it is me. It requires all of my attention and focus to feel that there is me, the soul, the observer, the thinker. And then there is this body as if it's dangling down below. I have to keep practicing. Just that simple, basic practice, nothing fancy. And not just while seated, while walking and moving around, the feeling that I am in this vehicle of the body. I am acting through this body, constantly reminding myself, recognizing and feeling this is true, this is right. Practice, practice. How I talk to myself and avoiding language such as my soul or I have a soul. It's very difficult to experience myself as a soul with language that separates me from that experience. I don't have a soul. I am a soul sitting behind the forehead. That's me, and this body is wrapped around me. Simple, basic practice. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Judy. It's a very powerful session. And thank you for those joining online. Just a warm reminder, feel free to send us questions on email And we should have reminded you as well that if you have questions to put into the chat box, that's why you see me looking sideways all the time. It's in case that you have any questions at all. And hello, we see a note there. I want to say Om Shanti as well. Have a good night, sister.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining,
Yeah.
and thank you to our interviewer.
Thank you for our
Very well
interviewer.
done.
And so please join us next week. We will continue the power of recognition in relationship to sustaining it, and also how recognition can sustain my study as well. I'm going to pass it over to Judy now to just let you know about upcoming sessions, while I will slip away to the IT section.
I know you souls will no longer look at that microphone in the same way. So August is almost here. It's remarkable. And we haven't yet quite updated the website. We still are discussing what the courses will be in August, but we do have the drop-ins for the most part continuing. So Thursday will also be interview format, looking more at the very basics, the essentials of Raj Yoga, going deeply into that. Experience will also continue on Thursday, 6:45 to 7:30, just before interview. Saturdays, at least for now, we're going to discontinue Experience at 1 o'clock, but we will continue with Inner Fitness 2 to 3 o'clock on Saturdays. We have yet to post the subjects, the themes, but that will be coming. And so the drop-ins for the most part will continue, and we hope that you can join. And thank you for joining this session. Om Shanti.